Hello and welcome. My name is Enrique Levin, co-founder and VP of Product at Zintro. Zintro is a global platform that makes it easy for companies to start conversations with highly specialized experts, consultants, contractors, and job candidates about potential phone consults, projects, and even employment opportunities. Specialization spans all industry sectors, disciplines, job functions, and geographies. Today's webinar, Networking, if you're collecting cards, you're doing it all wrong, will be presented by Katy Tynan, partner at MindBridge Partners. It is with great pleasure I introduce Zintro expert Katy Tynan. She's the author of Practical Guides to Career Transitions, as well as a speaker and consultant in how work is evolving. She advises organizations on how to leverage the free agent workforce and integrate independent professionals with internal teams. Katy is an expert in how the employer-employee relationship is changing and how individuals, businesses, and educational institutions need to adapt to the evolving landscape of work. Over her 20-year career in IT and operations consulting, Katy has advised hundreds of organizations on how to find practical, sustainable solutions leveraging technology and human capital for competitive advantage. Katy has also been a part of multiple successful startup exits, including Winforia Networks, acquired by Motorola in 2003, and Thrive Networks, acquired by Staples in 2007. In 2013, Katy founded MindBridge Partners to provide strategic advice and guidance to organizations and educational institutions as they manage through business model transitions and organizational growth. She's the author of Survive Your Promotion, the 90-Day Success Plan for New Managers, and her most recent book, Free Agent, the Independent Professional's Roadmap to Self-Employment Success. If you would like to ask Katy any specific questions throughout the webinar, feel free to use the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. In the top right corner of your screen, you will see a little orange arrow. Click on that, and you will see a question section. Feel free to ask anything throughout the webinar. Katy will respond to questions after the presentation, so stay tuned. We will also be providing Katy's contact information, including her Zintro profile and how to reach out to her. As you know, contacting someone through Zintro directly is completely free and super easy. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to our presenter today, Katy Tynan.
Great. Well, thanks so very much, Enrique, and welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this afternoon to talk a little bit about networking. And I think when I ask people how they feel about networking, I often get, eye rolls and groans. There are not a lot of people who love networking, but I think if we learn to do it the right way and if we approach it the right way, then it can be a little less painful and it can be a lot more fruitful. And really that's the goal for those of us who are independent experts and independent professionals, is to make the very best use of our time and to really streamline that process and shorten that sales process between how much time and energy it takes to go out and meet new clients so that we can focus our time on doing the work we do best. So today we're going to talk about several topics related to networking. First of all, I want to cover why you need a strong network and what the value is in having a great network of people who both on the business side can help you find business, but also on the services side can help you and support your own business. I want to talk about the two different kinds of networking and why sometimes we fall into the habit of doing one when we really should be doing the other. And I want to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities that we see with networking. I'm also going to review 5 kinds of networkers, and you're going to recognize some of these people as people that you've met, and there are also going to be times when you have displayed some of these traits, and so there are things to think about as you're going out into the world, going out to meetings, going out to networking events, about how you present yourself, how you like to be presented from other people, and what feels authentic in the networking process. Then we're going to talk about how to define your own strategy so that you can do the kind of networking that's most effective for you. We're going to sum it up, and then I'd love to hear from you and hear what you have questions about, because really this is a dialogue, and at the heart of it, I think we all learn best from one another. So that's what's on the agenda today. And I want to start out with why. Why do we need a strong network? So this is from the 2015 Upwork Freelancing in America survey. And you can see that over 70% of work comes to freelancers from friends and family and from professional contacts. That is networking. Your friends and your family will help you get in the door. Your professional contacts will get you in touch with the right people. And over 70% of your workflow will most likely come from these two vehicles. So that is why networking is so very important. And that's not to dismiss the value of social media, of online job boards, of your employers, and of some of the other specialized networks that are out there that can help you find work. But when people come to me and say, Katy, I need a client soon, I always tell them that the very best source of your first clients and your ongoing clients is your network, is those people that you already have relationships with. And it's a crowded marketplace out in the world, and so if you can come in the door with a warm introduction from a friend or from a professional contact, from somebody who vouches for you, you should never underestimate the power of those kinds of introductions. So networking is critical. It's something that you really can't build your business without. So now let's talk a little bit about the how of networking. And I think for me certainly, and for a lot of creative professionals, people who do creative work, there's this division between networking that we do in person, out in the world, shaking hands, talking to people, meeting people, and the networking we do online through our websites, through our social media presence, through email marketing and all of those things. And I think the tendency for a lot of people is to focus on the online part of networking and to focus on their social media presence and to make sure that people are putting out good content, and we all want to be engaged in social media, and we know that's important, but it can also become a tremendous time suck. You can spend a lot of time working the online channel, and while it's an important channel, it is also a channel that's more distant from your customers. And so when you spend time doing online networking, and especially if you're afraid or you're uncomfortable with doing in-person networking, spending all your time doing online networking, it takes a lot more work to build up a network that buys online as opposed to in person. And so these two different types of networking are both very important. You absolutely need to do both, and in fact you cannot do one without the other. You cannot go out and do in-person networking if you don't have a social media presence and a website, because in many cases that's the first thing that the people who meet you want to go look at to validate whether you're someone they want to work with. But at the same time, the time that you spend networking online is in many cases a lot of work for a smaller return from clients than the networking you do in person. So I want to make sure that we separate these two different kinds of networking and that you allocate the right amount of time to each one, but that you remember that the in-person networking is in many, many cases the fastest way to actually go out and get yourself clients. And before we go too far down this path, I also want to say it's not just about clients. When you're networking, when you're out speaking to people in the world, you are looking for people who potentially want to buy from you, but you're also discovering potential partners. You're finding out what people are worried about, what people are talking about, what questions people have. You may find communities of support. I do quite a lot of networking, and I want to make sure that we talk about this for a moment. In the freelance and expert marketplace, there is no such thing as competition. People ask me all the time, well, Katy, you network with these other operations consultants, these other people who talk about culture and business transformation. Aren't you worried that they're going to steal your clients? No, absolutely not. I know tens and hundreds of people who do similar work to what I do, but I only need a small number of clients, and they only need a small number of clients to be successful, and fitting the right client with the right consultant is immensely valuable. So if you can find the exact right client relationship for you, and if you can pass on the client relationships that are not perfect to you to people who are the right fit, then you become a valuable resource. And so it's not so much about being worried that you're going to be in a competitive marketplace when you go out and find these communities of practice and other people that do what you do. It's that you're going to learn what those other people are seeing, and you're actually going to increase your ability to find clients and to serve clients. So don't worry about competitiveness when you're talking to other people who do similar things that you do. You also, when you network, are getting to know vendors. You're talking to people who can help you. And I say this all the time, there are things that I do well, and then there are things that I don't do well. And for many years in my business, I tried to do all of the things that needed to get done myself because I really felt like that was the most cost-effective way to work. And what I realized is I spent hours of time doing things that I was not particularly good at. So I encourage you to understand and recognize when your time is valuable and when you should really be engaging an expert, perhaps from your network, perhaps from this network, to help you move forward. And then you also have, when you network, the opportunity to find professional development opportunities, to figure out what it is that other people are doing and learning and what places you should go to learn more about your particular business and specialty. And then finally, it just gets you out of your routine. So oftentimes when you go out to network, it's something that breaks you out of what you've been doing day to day, and it allows you to think about other things you could be doing, and it allows you to see what other people are doing outside of their own routines. So networking is not just about bringing in this massive pipeline of new clients. That is important, but there are many other benefits to being able to network well. So what are the challenges of networking? Let's put this on the table. Why do we shy away from networking and say, oh, do I have to do this? And as I said, we have these two different types of networking. Let's talk about the in-person networking first. There is nothing more awkward than walking into a room full of people that you don't know and trying to start conversations with them. It is awkward. It is always awkward. And while it's necessary, it's something that I think we all naturally shy away from, that feeling of, oh my goodness, I'm in a room full of strangers and now I have to figure out what to say. It's also time consuming. If you're going out to networking events, or if you're going out to meet people in person and have coffee and have lunches and to do all of those things, it takes time and it can be expensive. Some of the networking groups that you can join have a cost to belong to them, and those costs can be higher than the money that you're making from your client. So especially early on when you're getting into the expertise field, you have to think about, can I afford to belong to one of these groups, and what's the return on investment that that's going to get me? And honestly, I think sometimes we look at that cost and we use it as an excuse to say, well, I didn't really want to do that anyway, so it's too expensive, I just won't do it. I'll just, focus on my online networking. And so now let's talk about the challenges of online networking and social media. It is very, very hard to get attention. There are many of us out doing the same work. So if you go out and look for people who do the type of work that I do, who consult with businesses on their operational practices, you will find that there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of people that do this work. And so in order for me to capture the attention of my audience online, I have to be incredibly consistent with my message, with my brand, and also with the content I produce. So I can't take a week off and say, well, I just don't feel like writing anything new this week. I can't ignore Twitter for a month and then pop back into it. So online networking requires a commitment of time, consistency, creation of content, and developing a relationship with the other people who are in your community of practice, and that can be a challenge. I've heard people describe social media as shouting in a crowded room, and I think in some sense it's true. When you're trying to network and when you're trying to find people who want to buy from you in the online world, which literally touches households across the entire globe, it is a very crowded marketplace, and trying to refine who you're talking to and where they're looking for information and how you get your foot in the door can be a difficult thing. So those are the big challenges of networking. Those are the things that I think sometimes hold us back from doing this networking work that we need to do. But the reality is there are benefits. So I want to talk about where you focus your time first and where you think about spending your time, because there's a huge reach with networking with social media. There's a huge reach online, but business comes from direct connections. Business and people who are buying are going to come from people who are much closer to you. So I suggest that you start there. I certainly, again, think you need to have an online brand presence. You need to have a social media presence. You need to allocate a percentage of your time to that. But when you think about going out and looking for business, you want to think about going out into the world. So let's talk about that part. Let's talk about the actual going out into the world. And I want to talk now about these 5 different personas that I think we oftentimes see when we're out at networking events. And they fall into these categories not because they're bad people, and in fact I have behaved in probably each and every one of these ways at least some point when I have been out networking and talking to people. But it's important to recognize these different personas and to look at yourself when you go out and meet with people, because some of these behaviors are going to turn customers away from you and turn clients away from you. And it also is important to remember that when you're out there networking, it's something you're practicing. It's something you're getting better at every time. It's not something that people are born knowing how to do perfectly. And so if you find, when I talk through these different categories and you say, oh my goodness, that's me, that's not the end of the world. That doesn't mean, oh, you can't network. It means now you have to consciously think about how you approach it and what you need to do to shift your behavior in order to make that networking process more effective for you. So the first person that I think we are all familiar with is the talker. And the talker is the person that when you first meet them, they immediately start talking to you. I have been this person. I am certainly an extrovert, and I certainly revert to filling the air when there's nobody else talking. So the good thing about this person is that they're talkative, and in many cases they're engaging people, and they go together with somebody I'll talk about later who's the more anxious networker. The talker is somebody who's going to make conversation, and if you're anxious, it's easy to fall in with a talker and say, oh, this is great, I don't have to do anything, this person is just going to talk and now I don't feel so awkward and everything's fine. The problem, though, is that it doesn't get you anywhere. So the talker monopolizes the conversation. They're the person who's just to hear themselves talk or telling long stories or giving their value proposition, but everything comes back to them. They're really not listening. They're not open to hearing what other people have to say, and they want to be the center of attention all the time, which is something that I can understand, but at the same time, in a networking situation, it's just not appropriate. Now, this can come from nerves. It can come from anxiety. It can come from somebody who is not sure what to do, and so they talk. But if this is you, if you recognize yourself in this description, what you need to do is think about strategies for how you turn that around. So maybe it's a limit, and you tell yourself, you know, I'm only going to talk for a minute, and then I'm just going to stop. And sometimes it's verbal cues like, well, what about you? What do you do? So when someone comes to you and says, what do you do for work? And all of a sudden you find yourself rattling off your life history for the last 10 years, you need to consciously stop yourself and say, well, that's what I've been up to. What have you been up to? So there are ways and sort of cues that you can help yourself if you're this person. If you encounter this person and you find yourself trapped in a conversation with a talker, you need to find ways to gracefully move on from that conversation. You can say, thank you so much, that's great information. I'm going to go grab a drink, or I need to go find this person, or whatever your process is. But you want to be careful of not getting stuck spending an hour or an entire networking event listening to someone who will talk and never stop. So the tagline at the bottom here, and I have these to help you remember this person, is enough about me, let's talk about you. What do you think about me? So this is the person who's really always turning the conversation back to themselves. The next person is the butterfly, and really in the title of this webinar, when I first was talking about networking the wrong way, I'm really talking about the butterfly. the people who often feel very productive when they do this, they go into an event, they flip from group to group, they collect cards, they just want to hear everybody's elevator speech and talk to as many people as possible, and they're not really focused on what is it that I'm trying to get out of this. So again, this is something that happens when you don't like networking and you feel like it's a chore. Oh, I have to go to this event. I'm going to go in for an hour. I'm going to get a bunch of cards. I'm going to try and get as much done as possible. And the goal here for many people is I just have to get through this. So if this resonates with you, if you feel like you're this person, the advice that I would give you is focus on one person. Focus on finding one person that you're interested in. And you can actually spend much less time at a networking event if your goal is to find one person that you're interested in, that seems interested in you, and that you think there might be some potential, whether it's a partnership or whether it's a vendor relationship or whether you think they could be a client. But you find that one person and you talk to them. Now, you may need to talk to 4 or 5 people before you make that connection, but always when you go into a networking scenario, your goal should be, how can I find that one person that even if I talk to them for 15 minutes and they seem interesting and now I have their card and I know that I want to follow up with them for a coffee or for lunch or something like that, now you've been successful and you can stop. So you can save yourself a ton of time rather than flitting for an hour from person to person to person. If you just spend 15 minutes and uncover one person that you're very interested in, you've accomplished something. So now the flip side of that is if you're encountering the butterfly and you hand them your card, you've basically thrown that card in the trash. It is going in a big pile that they're going to stick on their desk. They're maybe going to connect to you on LinkedIn, and now they have 6,000 LinkedIn contacts or 10,000 LinkedIn contacts, and you're just one more of them. They don't know you. They don't know anything about your business. They're not going to help you sell anything, and they don't really have any ability to make connections for you. So certainly you can give them your card, but ultimately it's pretty rare that you're going to see business come back to you from someone who practices the butterfly mentality in a networking event. So recognize these people. There are a lot of them out there, and a lot of people think that this is the definition of successful networking. So I can't say enough, this is not the goal. And when you start to see yourself collecting a big stack of cards, if you look at your stack of cards and you really feel like you don't know anyone in that pile, that's when I think you need to reassess and say, this strategy is not going to get me the results that I'm looking for. So now I want to talk about the clinger. And I think we have all been this person at one point in our careers. You know, sooner or later, whether it's early in your career, whether it's the first networking event you've ever gone to, you go in the door and somebody talks to you, whether it's the person who's right at the door, whether it's the talker, whoever it is, and you say, oh, I found someone. Now I don't have to go through this awkward moment of walking up to a group of people and trying to introduce myself. I'm just going to stay with this person. So the clinger meets one person and sticks with them. And they don't talk a lot of the times. The clinger is a shy person, and again, we've all been this person. You don't know what to say. You're not sure. You haven't really formulated your business proposition well enough yet. Everybody else seems to have these wonderful elevator pitches and quick speeches and the ability to say who they are and what they do, and you just don't feel like you can do that. So most clingers are anxious people. They're anxious. They don't really want to be there at that event. They don't really feel comfortable. A lot of creative people fall into this category because people who do creative work, especially when they work by themselves a lot of the time, and introverts fall into this category, people who aren't comfortable with a lot of people, and they don't like networking. And what I would say, if you feel like this, if you legitimately and genuinely detest networking events, don't go. If you feel so uncomfortable, you're not helping yourself, and you're just making your whole situation worse by going into something that you don't enjoy doing. And there are other ways to network outside of networking events if you are an introvert. Now, does that mean that I think that you should just go to social media, which I think is a fallback for a lot of people who are in this situation? No, I don't think that you can do 100% of your networking just through social media and email blasts. You can do a lot of it, you can get some good results, but at the end of the day, you have to find a comfort level with talking to people. Now, sometimes the way to do this is to join an association or to join some sort of a community separate from an open networking and get into a scenario where it's not this awkward total stranger relationship, but it's a community of people who are sharing leads and who are maybe introducing people one-on-one. That can be a good strategy. So if you genuinely detest networking, if you genuinely feel uncomfortable, then what I would say is you need to find a different strategy that feels authentic to you, because you will not get any value out of the time you spend in networking events. And the flip side of this is, if a clinger has attached themselves to you, if you're in a networking event and now suddenly you have this person who says, you know, are you going to get something to eat? Are you going to the bathroom? Are you going to get a drink? I'll come. When you have that person attached to you, recognizing that that person is uncomfortable, you can sometimes help them by introducing them to people, but a lot of times they're just going to tag along with you, and it can be pretty hard, without being rude, to separate them. I usually just let them be, and if they want to hang out and come and walk around with me, that's kind of okay. But at the same time, I think you don't want to get in the habit of sort of having somebody attached to you all the time, so you want to be a little careful not to end up with people looking at you and saying, who is that person? Do you know them? But definitely try to help if you can, because this is a place that we've all been. We have all been in that place where we don't know anyone, we don't feel comfortable, whether it's just that we're having a bad day, we don't feel like interacting. And honestly, to me, the very best thing you can do if you feel like that is just to go back home and to try a different strategy the next time. So the Klingon, and I use this word because many people are familiar with the Klingons, this is the polar opposite of the Klinger. This is a person who is really aggressively assertive. So I find this sometimes in salespeople, people who want to talk about themselves, and they'll talk about you, but only to tell you why you're totally wrong about everything that you're doing. They want to showcase the fact that they're really great at everything. They want to tell you what you should be doing. And they're not so much interested in making connections. They're interested in showcasing their own fabulousness. And it's really tough sometimes because you can get trapped by people like this. You can get into a situation where you find yourself defensive, and it can actually bring you down in an event, because here you are and you're trying to go out and meet people and be authentic and speak but also listen, and to have someone who suddenly comes across as very aggressive and, you know, wants to tell you what to do can make you feel sort of withdrawn. So when you encounter somebody like this, from my perspective, you need to pull back and you need to sort of change the conversation or move away and just join a different group and move on. But what I want you to recognize, again, is if this is you, if you hear yourself when you listen to yourself, and you should ask for feedback from people that you network with, if this is something that you're falling into because, again, you're an outspoken person and you like to tell people what you think and you want to tell people what's on your mind, that's great if you know them fairly well. It's certainly fine for trash talking about the Patriots. It's certainly great when you're talking about sports. It is not great when you're meeting people for the first time. And you have to strike that balance when you trade on your expertise of not being a prima donna and not being a person who is always right. So when you're out talking about the work that you do and the services that you offer and the expertise that you have, I'm not going to tell you that you should be a wallflower and you shouldn't make it clear what you do and what you're great at. But at the same time, you need to balance that against being this overbearing person that is only telling people that you're right and they're wrong. So this is a place where recognizing if you're going overboard is critical, because people are not going to tell you to your face, oh my goodness, you're the most annoying person ever. But if they think it and they walk away thinking that about you, it's not an impression that you want to leave. So again, this is you're doing that? That's totally wrong. Let me tell you what I do. So if you find yourself frequently correcting people, then you may be falling into this persona, and it's certainly something that you want to adjust and adapt. And one of the ways that I do that personally is to just remember that I have been wrong. I've been wrong in many cases in my career, and I know that. And sometimes, even when I think that I know the right thing, something that's completely right for me is not necessarily going to be right for anyone else. And so when I tell people this is what I do, I almost always caveat it with, I don't know whether this will work for you or not. So making sure that you're introducing that humility and making sure that you're introducing that understanding that the world is a funny place and not everything that works perfectly for me is going to work perfectly for everyone else. That's the way to move away from being this sort of authoritative expert who people feel like is overbearing. So the last persona I want to talk about is what I think we should all aspire to. This idea of the real deal, the person who's genuinely interested in you and in what you do, and also passionate about what they do, clear about their own message, enjoys people, enjoys meeting people, understands that business is a human pursuit, that this work that we do is fundamentally a human pursuit. And therefore, in order to do it well, we have to engage with one another on an authentic human level. So this is the person you meet. And a lot of people are immediately drawn to this person. They feel trustworthy. They're someone who talks enough to be engaged in the conversation, but really they're also asking lots of questions and want to hear about you. When you're in a networking event, when you're talking to a lot of people at once, if you really feel this way, you can't necessarily engage in a deep conversation with people because you'll be excluding other people and because it's very hard to build that relationship. So almost always this person will follow up with, hey, it was great to meet you. I'd like to learn more about what it is that you do. Can we meet for coffee? Can we get together? And it's a person who doesn't say that casually. They're not saying that to everybody in the room. They're really genuinely interested in you and in the opportunity they see as an intersection between what you do and what they do. And I will say this is exactly how Enrique Levin and I met originally. We were at an event and he came up to me and he said, hey, I'm really interested in this thing that you do. I think there's an opportunity for us to collaborate. Can we talk more? That's the real deal. And I think if you understand what it feels like to be approached that way, you see the value in approaching other people that way. So this ultimately is the goal. This is the secret sauce of how you can become a great networker, is to always seek out people where there's some opportunity for mutual benefit, and then to engage with them to learn more about them as a person, to learn a little bit about their goals, and then to ask them for that next step of, can we get to know each other? And then after that, it really is about follow-up. It's about not making 100 connections because there's no possibility that you can authentically follow up on 100 connections. But if you make one and then you follow up with that person and you see where that goes, and you make another and you follow up with that person and you see where it goes, oftentimes that's where you start to see this snowball reflects back to you, where those people that you've built that warm relationship with are now bringing you into clients and introducing you in a warm way to exactly who you need to meet. So this becomes a very efficient process. It becomes a situation where even though you're meeting fewer people than you might as a butterfly, they're more impactful people. And from a relationship building perspective, they're people that are going to help you move your business forward in a meaningful way. So this is the goal, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I really want to make sure that when you're out networking, you are thoughtful and self-reflective about what you're putting out into the world and what people are taking back from that. And so sometimes in order to do that, if you're stressed about networking, sometimes you need to bring someone with you and say to them very deliberately, look, I'm trying to get better at networking. Can you do me a favor and can you just sort of circulate with me and listen to how I'm interacting with people, and then give me some feedback and let me know. And you can even share this webinar with them so that they understand these personas and ask them, you know, how do you think I was perceived? Because it can be hard in and of ourselves, especially when we're in that situation where we're anxious and uncomfortable. It can be hard to be self-reflective. It can be hard to really look at ourselves and say, what am I doing? Am I talking too much? Am I talking too little? Am I being a big jerk? What am I doing in this scenario? So having a buddy who's going to give you that honest feedback, who you've asked for that honest feedback so you know that it's coming from a trusted source, can really help you to narrow down some of those elements of your persona that may or may not be working for you in the networking world. So when you're going out into the world and meeting people, you need to have a strategy. I know people who network just because they've been told, this is what I do, I need to go out and network, that's how I'm supposed to get business. But networking is a space of time that you're actively choosing to spend doing this specifically for a purpose. So you need to have a strategy. You need to know why you're doing it, why you're spending time on this as opposed to things that you could be spending your time on. And part of that strategy is understanding who do you want to meet and why. Who are you looking for? Are you looking for clients? Are you looking for people who are going to help you with your business? Are you looking for partnerships? Which of those things are you after? And then who are you? How are you presenting yourself and your expertise? What differentiates you from other people? How are you helping other people? And what can you do in order to help those other people? So begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey, and know exactly what your targets and your goals are when you think about networking. That's also empowering. When you go out to network and when you go to talk to people, if you know what your intent is, and what you're trying to accomplish, then you have a much better sense of what you need to be doing, and you get less caught up in yourself and whether, you know, you're embarrassing yourself. So who are you? And defining your one-line pitch is very important. And you'll see practiced networkers, you'll see people who are really good at this, they will have a really succinct one-line way of articulating what they do. So I help small businesses find more customers, or I create beautiful websites, or my software helps developers write better code, whatever that thing is that you do. And you're going to have to work on this. You know, it always seems so easy when you hear someone else's tagline, but creating a tagline for yourself, telling your brand story in one sentence, is a challenging thing to do. So do spend some time on this, and it ties into everything else that you do with your brand. You may already have it if you've done a branding exercise with a consultant. If you haven't, that's actually a really worthwhile thing to spend money on, to have a branding consultant help you really define who you are and how you help. And then how about you is always the follow-up. When you put out your one-line pitch, don't immediately then go into your 20-minute elevator pitch. Stop and say, how about you? What do you do? And that way you're immediately creating that two-way conversation that can help you make those authentic connections. And then how can you help? How can you help is not about selling. It's about asking questions to help people figure out what they need and how you can help. In some sense, all networking is matchmaking. So you may go into an event hoping you're going to find a client, and somebody else may go into that event hoping they're going to find a client. And the one thing that can happen is you talk to each other and say, you're not my client, nope, you're not my client either, and that's where it ends. But if you can take that one step further and say, who would you like to get to know here, or why are you in this field, or what's going well, you can open up that conversation beyond just the, are you my client, are you my mother, and you can move on to what is it that that person is searching for and how can you help them find it, which can be a really powerful way, again, of making those connections. So who do you want to meet and why is also an important part of your strategy. I have talked to a lot of people who, when you ask them who they sell to and who their ideal buyer or audience is, their answer is, well, everybody needs what I do. And that's not helpful. So the more specific that you can be about the industry that you serve, about what role that you play, about what company size is ideal for you, or the location that's ideal. So just as an example, when I talk to people about what I do, I tend to tell people I work with companies from 20 to 200 employees, primarily in the professional services industry, and I help them redefine their company culture. So that's me, that's what I do, and primarily I do it right here in the greater Boston area, although I have clients that are nationwide. So when I talk to people, I know what I'm looking for, and it makes it easier for those people to direct me to the people that I need to talk to. So why are they important to your goals, and how can you help them achieve their goals? That's the root of who do you want to meet and why. And that's what takes the conversation from being very general, this is what I do, what do you do, to who do you know and who do I know that can help you? And in a lot of senses, it's an exchange of value where neither of you are actually working directly with one another, but together you're helping each other get where you need to go. So finally, just to wrap it up, and then we're going to move into Q&A in just a couple minutes, I just want to put it all together with the who, what, where, when, why, how. And these are the journalism questions from your youth you probably remember. So when you think about networking, who do you want to meet is always the first question. And I don't mean who, like I want to meet Bill Clinton or I want to meet Johnny Depp. I want to meet a specific type of person, whether it's my customer or whether it's a vendor that I'm looking to hire or whether it's a partner or a relationship I'm looking to build. But I walk into any conversation knowing who I'm looking to meet. And again, this goes beyond networking events. This is how you use LinkedIn. This is how you talk to people in your network to find other people in your network. So if you're uncomfortable with networking events, that's totally fine. But you still need to know who you want to meet, and then you can find the vehicle that's going to help you find them. So where do CEOs hang out? Well, in many cases, they hang out at CEO clubs and mastermind groups and things like that. So then how do you engage with those groups? It starts with knowing who you're looking to meet. And then what? What are you trying to convey? What is it that's your purpose in going out and doing this networking? Are you trying to tell people about your brand and your capabilities? Are you trying to tell people what you do and what expertise you have? Are you trying to sell something very specific? And if so, how do you expect that to happen in the networking meeting? And then where are those clients and connections? And where do they spend their time? Are they at conferences? Are they at networking events? Are they at sales meetings? How do you access those people? And when do they meet? And then why do they need you? This is really the part I think that many, many people lack when they're creating their personal expertise brand. It's easy to say what I do. It's harder to say why you need me. So if I can't make a compelling why statement to a CEO, they're never going to hire me. And if I can't make a compelling why statement to somebody who might want to partner with me, they're going to move on. So you need to be able to put yourself in the mind and in the mindset of your potential customer so that you can answer that question more easily. And you should expect that question. Why should I hire you? Why would I want to work with you? Why should I spend my valuable time talking to you? What's in it for me? And the better you can answer that question, the better off you are. And then last but not least, how can you help? Really, truly, the mechanics of how can you help this person find what they need and where they need to go. So breaking down your strategies, we want to build relationships, we want to not collect cards, we want to know the whole person. Don't sell on the first date. I always tell people this. Don't start off explaining what you're going to sell them. Know the person first. Make one connection. Solve a problem they have right now. That's the best way to get someone to remember you, is just to solve a problem for them. And then ask for one connection to solve a problem you have right now. If you have a problem, if you're going to buy something right now, there's nothing better than finding someone who can help you, because again, you're building that relationship. And then leave people with a very clear message about who you are, about what you do, and about how you can help. And that way, when they walk away and then they encounter someone that they think that should meet you, they're going to remember you and they're going to make that connection for you. So that's it, and I appreciate all of your coming here and listening, and I'd love now to hear your questions and to answer some of them and to see what we can learn from each other.
Thank you very much for all your insights, Katy. That was amazing. We have a couple of questions I would like to remind the audience. First of all, I would like to ask you, Katy, if you can put your contact information on screen, your Zintro profile, so that people can reach out to you. Everyone, feel free to reach out to Katy. Contacting her through Zintro is extremely easy. Also, we're going to leave the session open for some, let's say, 10-15 minutes, so we can talk about a couple of questions our audience might have. Guys, feel free to ask anything. Now is the time. I'm going to get started with a question by Yeaton. He says he's a machine advisor and he deals in used machines. And his work as a consultant is on advising what machines are best for the needs of the customer. And so he says he discusses the needs of the customer and guides them on what machines are proper for their needs. And they feel really indebted to him, and they talk with him, and they appreciate the value he adds. And then after a couple of months, years, they completely forget about him and don't end up hiring him. So he feels that he achieves zero by networking in person. How can he keep that relationship alive after that initial discussion?
So that is a great question, and I think that is something that is on the mind of many people. You meet someone, you have a really great conversation, you invest a bunch of time, you help them, and then you feel like they forget about you over time. So there's two aspects here that I want to say. First of all, many experts get in the habit of giving too much away for free. In other words, they're at a networking event and somebody says, gosh, I have this problem, can I meet you for coffee and pick your brain? And it turns into an hour of essentially free consulting, and you're sitting there giving them resources and all this terrific information, and then they don't need you, and then they don't need to hire you. So you need to be a little careful when you're working with a prospective customer not to give too much away, not to have 5 or 10 free consultations, not to answer 100 questions for free. It's perfectly fine to spend 15 minutes, a half an hour talking to someone and helping them. But once you go over that, you're really giving away your expertise for free, and that's not a good choice. And then the second side of that is if you have an engagement with someone and then for whatever reason, maybe it's the natural business cycle, whatever happens, there's going to be a gap and they're not going to need you for a period of time. This is where social media, where newsletters, email newsletters, and things of that nature can be tremendously valuable because you do want to keep that light touch, that keep in mind all the time so that when that person has a problem or hears of someone who has a problem, you're the first person that they think about. So the value of an email newsletter cannot be overstated. That ability to just keep a little finger on the pulse so that they don't forget about you during those interim times. And then do check in periodically with a quick phone call or a quick personalized email every 3 months or 6 months or whatever to remind your customers, especially your good customers, that you're still here, that you'd love to help them, that if there's anything that you can do, you'd love to hear about it. And it's just a good way to keep it fresh in their mind. We all know as business owners that we can get sucked into doing the day-to-day stuff and we forget about things. It's hard. But at the same time, if you're not actively keeping yourself fresh in their minds, then they're not necessarily going to think of you. Does that answer the question?
Well, Yeaton, feel free to throw in any follow-up questions there. Thank you very much, Katy. We have a lot of questions actually, so I'm going to try to go through the most relevant ones, and I'll make sure that you receive all the other questions so that everyone gets taken care of. And so we have a question by Errol. Errol says that when you go to a networking event, you tend to find these pre-existing cliques that exist already. People are kind of with friends and family. So the question is, I've gone to some where it seems that everyone knows each other, like they're a family and hang in large groups. They're very hard to penetrate. What do you suggest in these live networking events to penetrate these pre-existing groups, let's say?
That is a great question, and I will say it takes bravery to do this, but many, many times these pre-existing groups, they're people who know each other, and they're not going to help each other any more than they've already helped each other. So while they're there together as a group and they're sort of feeling comfortable and relaxing back in their comfort zone because they know people and they can just have chit-chat, they're not accomplishing their goals either. So if you go to one of those groups and you see 5 people standing in a circle talking to one another, it is perfectly acceptable, and in fact it is expected, that strangers are going to walk up to a group like that and introduce themselves at a networking event. And so even though the moment feels awkward to walk into someone else's conversation, if you join that circle, they will look at you and say, oh, hello. So it feels intimidating. I know that it does. But you should know that it's expected for you to join that circle of people who looks like an existing clique and to introduce yourself, and that they actually will be very interested, all of them, in talking to you because you're the only new person. And so if you have the bravery to go up and introduce yourself to them, sometimes the rewards are tremendous, especially if they have established relationships with other people in the groups, because then they can walk you right over and introduce you to other people. A well-run networking event will set that expectation. And so if you find people are rebuffing you when you do that, then it's probably not an event that you want to go to more than once, because if the people who are attending it don't have the expectation that it's a networking event and that you should be introducing yourself, then it's probably not someplace you should be. So certainly you should feel comfortable going up. The other way to do it is to wait for someone to break off from that group, and they do oftentimes, to go grab a drink or whatever, and then approach them there and then ask for an introduction. So there are many strategies for breaking into cliques like that, but I think the most important part is your own confidence to know that's why you're there, that's why the event is happening. It's perfectly okay to approach those groups and to get to know those people.
Thank you very much, Katy. I'm going to move on with a question by Tanya. And so she asks, if you have a meeting with someone and they say, I think we can work with you in the future, but they don't say how or when, what is the best frequency to send out an email reminder? Or is there anything I can actually do at that point in time to ensure that I know what's going to happen and when?
Well, so I would start out by asking a follow-up question right at that moment. When they say, we think we'd like to work with you in the future, it's a great time to ask the follow-up question, how would you envision that working? What do you see as an opportunity for us to work together? And get them to articulate a little bit about it. And they may come back to you and tell you, oh, you know, we have this project, but it's not funded yet, so it's probably not going to be ready for 6 months or so. But try and pull out a few details in order to get a sense of what the appropriate follow-up should be. And then the other tack and avenue there is to take a look at their company. So one of the strategies that a good friend of mine taught me is watch for a company. If you have a company that you really want to work with and you think there's an opportunity there and they've said something like this to you, go and pay attention to what they post on their news and events on their website. And when they make an announcement, if they won an award or if they got to join a particular conference or if they did something like that, then you can use that as a reason to follow up and say, hey, congratulations, I see you made the best places to work in the Boston Business Journal. That's really terrific. I wanted to sit down and see what you were thinking about XYZ. So use those events as opportunities to give you leverage to follow up, and that way it doesn't just seem like you're trolling for work out of the blue.
We have another question by Donald. So if you're a new small business owner and you're trying to break into a client space such as a federal agency, what's the most effective approach to building productive relationships? Few and valuable versus many and invaluable, let's say.
So when you're trying to break into a space that has very specific gatekeepers, and that's certainly true of federal contracting, it's really important to understand that that's a long, slow process, and it's a relationship building process. What I often recommend to people is if you're looking at federal contracts, you can go and find who has been awarded similar contracts in the past And sometimes for a small organization, it makes sense to partner up with an organization that has already done that kind of work and come in as a subcontractor in order to make yourself known to the contractors themselves and ultimately get your hat in the ring. But making those relationships and understanding again what the needs are and what the process is very important. A lot of people get thrown out of RFP processes, public RFP processes in the federal contracting world because they don't follow the letter of absolute detail of how you are supposed to submit. So if they say they want 5 copies, hard copy, mailed to Denver on Tuesday, you better have 5 copies in hard copy mailed to Denver on Tuesday. And if you mail it on Wednesday, or if you send it by email, or you send 4 copies, you're not going to be part of the process. So federal contracting particularly, but in a lot of other industries as well, it's very specific what you can and can't do, and you need to know that. And the way you get to know that is, again, by building the relationships with those people who are actually doing the procurement to try and understand exactly what they need to make their jobs easier. So it's a tough market, but I do believe you can break into it. You just need to be very thoughtful about how you approach the process.
The next question is from, and sorry for bombarding you with so many questions, but
that's okay. These are
keep
great.
Coming in. We have 4 minutes, and I'm going to try to be respectful of our audience's time. So I'm going to try to choose the more general questions, and again, I'll make sure you get all the remaining questions so they can be taken care of after.
Terrific.
So we have a question by Ara, and Ara says, can you share some good ice-breaking introductory comments? Some good opening lines, whether meeting a group of folks you don't know or an individual?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, I'm not so great at icebreaker lines. I will tell you that straight out of the gate. There are people who practice them, and you can probably find some good ones online. I will tell you that typically when I approach a group, the first thing that I do is join the group and wait. And wait because oftentimes there's already a conversation ongoing. And if you pop yourself into the middle of a conversation, even if you have a really witty one-liner to open the conversation with, you're interrupting, and that's not respectful. So first come into the conversation and wait. And when the conversation pauses for a moment, frequently people will look to you because you've just joined the conversation. And at that point, I would ask a question. And sometimes it's good to ask a question that's relevant to the industry, or you can single out a specific person and say, because many times they're wearing name tags and it tells you what they do. And so I oftentimes start with, hey, Nancy, I see you're the CEO of whatever company. What is it exactly that you guys do? And let somebody else open the conversation for you, and at that point it becomes a dialogue. So I know there are lots of sort of clever and witty ice-breaking things you can say, but to me, the first order of business is don't be rude. You do need to be assertive. You do need to put yourself into the conversation. So if the conversation is sort of going around and being more generalized, then I would just turn to the person next to you and ask them that question. It is fine to open up a second conversation. If you have a circle of people talking to each other, a lot of times everyone will be watching the one person who's talking, but it's fine to have 2 conversations going on at once. So if 2 people are talking to each other, it's perfectly reasonable to turn to the person next to you and just ask them the question, hey, what is it that you do? Tell me a little bit about that. Asking a question is much easier than trying to start a conversation with, hi, I'm Katy and this is what I do. That always feels much more awkward.
I've certainly been there. That's very, very interesting. So we have a last question for live Q&A is from Armando. I think it's a little out of the box, but I think it's interesting. Do you think it can be beneficial to create your own networking event and invite people?
Oh, that's a great question.
That you're interested in networking with.
So I have a friend who did exactly that, and it was tremendously successful. He hosted an event. He happened to have a personal connection through his network to Susie Welch, who is Jack Welch's wife. And so he called her up and said, hey, I want to run a networking event. I wonder if you'd come and speak to us. And she said, sure, I'd be delighted to. So first of all, if you want to hold a networking event of your own, it's always great to look in your network and try and find somebody that can help you bring people in, that can be an interesting speaker, and that can help drive conversation. But even if you don't have that and you just want to host an event and get people together, that's great too. I would suggest when you do it that you open the net as wide as you can, and that means going out personally and asking people who run other small networking groups if they want to invite the people that they like, and just try and get together an interesting group of people, not too big, especially if it's the first time, but a group of people that you think is going to have an interesting conversation or have something to add to one another. And then the last piece of advice I would give goes back to what I said before. Make sure that you're a good facilitator, a good host. It's not enough to just get people in a room together. One of the nicest events that I've been to has dedicated, there's 5 or 6 of them, hosts who are wearing special name tags, and they ask everyone who's new to the event to come up to a host, and then the host takes them around and introduces them to several people in the group that they know that that person would be interested in. And that's a much nicer and warmer way to come into an event. So do think about some of those nuances if you're going to host an event. But I absolutely think it's a great idea. And if you can pull some great people into the room, it can be very beneficial.
Thank you very much, Katy. I think that was very enlightening. So we're running out of time. We actually ran out of time, but I didn't want to interrupt that great response. So on behalf of Zintro and our over 190,000 members, I want to thank you so much for sharing all your insights. Zintro members, again, feel free to contact Katy by going to her Zintro profile. It's extremely easy to reach out to experts on Zintro and completely free. Also, if you have a need beyond her expertise, feel free to send an inquiry, and we will make sure we put you in touch with the best possible experts for your problem. This closes today's presentation. I wish you all a very nice day, and thank you for attending.